Blood pooled on the cold marble floor of a $20 million penthouse, choking the life out of me while my best friend kissed the man I loved. Then darkness. When my eyes snapped open, the calendar had rolled back 5 years. She wanted to steal my life again. This time, I handed it to her, wrapped in barbed wire. The last thing I remember from my first life was the agonizing, burning sensation in my throat and the hollow click of Vanessa's red Christian Louboutin heels echoing against the imported Italian marble. I was paralyzed, lying at an awkward angle by the grand piano in the Upper East Side penthouse I had practically paid for. Vanessa Blake, the girl I had shared cheap ramen and twin beds with in our cramped Bushwick apartment, stood over me. She wasn't looking at me with pity or horror. She was holding a crystal tumbler, the remnants of the aconite-laced bourbon swirling at the bottom. "You always were too smart for your own good, Harper," she had whispered, her voice devoid of the bubbly, infectious warmth that had originally drawn me to her in college. But nobody likes the quiet, smart girl. They like the shiny girl. "You built the empire, but I'm the queen. Dominic doesn't want a ghost writer. He wants me. You shouldn't have threatened to show him the original drafts." I tried to scream, but only a wet, gurgling sound escaped my lips. My husband, Dominic Reed, the billionaire titan of Reed Capital, a man whose empire I had secretly structured behind the scenes while Vanessa played his brilliant strategist and loving wife, walked into the room. He didn't look at me. He looked at her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Is it done?" he asked coldly. They had planned it together. The man I had loved from the shadows, the man who thought Vanessa was the genius behind the Aegis acquisition, had conspired with her to kill the only loose end, me. The darkness swallowed me whole. Then I gasped. My lungs desperately clawed for air as I bolted upright. I wasn't on cold marble. I was on a lumpy, spring-shot IKEA mattress. The smell of cheap Folgers coffee and stale street air wafted through a cracked window. The relentless siren of an NYPD cruiser blared down Lexington Avenue. I was trembling, my hands gripping thin, faded cotton sheets. I scrambled out of bed, my knees weak, and rushed to the cracked mirror hanging on the closet door. Staring back at me was a younger, exhausted, but very much alive Harper Hayes. There were no bruises, no blood. I grabbed my iPhone, an older model, a cracked screen. The date glowing back at me made my heart stop. October 14th, 2019. 5 years ago. The exact day my life had sealed its doomed trajectory. The bedroom door pushed open, and there she was. Vanessa. She looked so young, so impossibly innocent in her oversized NYU hoodie, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. The sight of her made my stomach heave, a phantom pain throbbing in my throat. I wanted to lunge at her. I wanted to wrap my hands around her neck and squeeze until her eyes popped. But I froze, the ice-cold realization washing over me. If I killed her now, I'd go to prison, and she wouldn't suffer. Death was too quick, too merciful for what she had done to me, for what they had done to me. "Morning, sleepyhead," Vanessa chirped, setting a mug on my cramped desk. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just a nightmare," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. I kept my face neutral, burying the inferno of rage deep into the pit of my stomach. "Well, wake up. I need a massive favor." She sat on the edge of my bed, giving me that practiced, helpless pout that had manipulated me for years. You know that internship application for Reed Capital? The executive strategist role? The final round requires a full demographic leverage proposal for their proposed merger with Vanguard Tech. Harper, I can't do it. I don't even know what EBITDA stands for. If I don't get this, I'm going to have to move back to Ohio. In my past life, this was the moment I saved her. I had spent 3 sleepless nights crafting a brilliant, airtight 60-page proposal. Vanessa had taken it, slapped her name on it, and handed it directly to Dominic Reed at a networking event. It blew him away. It was the foundation of her entire career, the bait that caught the billionaire. She became his prodigy, his lover, and eventually his wife. Meanwhile, she kept me around as her personal assistant, throwing me crumbs while I did 100% of her corporate heavy lifting. "Please, Harp," she begged, clasping her hands together. "Just write this one proposal for me. I'll make it up to you, I swear. I'll pay your half of the rent for the next 3 months." I stared at her. The universe had ripped the fabric of time apart to put me back in this exact room, at this exact moment. I could say no. I could write the proposal for myself, walk into Reed Capital, and claim the life that was supposed to be mine. But then I thought of Dominic's cold, dead eyes as I choked on my own blood. He wasn't a victim of Vanessa's manipulation. He was a ruthless, arrogant shark who valued optics over loyalty. If I approached him as a mousy, introverted nobody, he wouldn't look twice, no matter how brilliant my portfolio was. No. I wouldn't just stop Vanessa. I was going to let her climb the ladder again. I was going to let her build her magnificent glass castle, higher and higher, until the air got thin and the stakes were a matter of life and death, and then I was going to smash the foundation with a sledgehammer. "Okay," I said softly, taking a sip of the terrible coffee. "I'll write it for you." Vanessa squealed, throwing her arms around me. "Oh my God, Harper, you are a lifesaver. Literally the best friend a girl could ask for." "You have no idea," I whispered against her shoulder. For the next 3 days, I wrote. But I didn't write the same airtight masterpiece I had in my previous life. I wrote something far more insidious. On the surface, the proposal was a stroke of absolute genius. It outlined a revolutionary market synthesis filled with aggressive acquisition strategies that would immediately catch a predator like Dominic Reed's eye. But buried deep within the financial modeling, buried in the raw data appendices and the risk assessment matrices, I planted landmines. I used a highly complex, slightly flawed algorithm for the projected quarterly returns, a mathematical quirk I silently dubbed the Hayes variable. It was a tiny thread, invisible to a casual reader, invisible even to a standard financial auditor. But when the time came, when real millions were put on the line based on this model, pulling that one thread would unravel the entire company. I handed the pristine, leather-bound portfolio to Vanessa on a Thursday morning. "It's done," I told her. "Make sure you emphasize the demographic leverage on page 42 if they ask." She snatched it from my hands, barely glancing at the words. "You're a saint, Harper. I'm going to owe you my firstborn. Just remember who got you there." I smiled. Vanessa got the job. It happened exactly as it had before. She bypassed the standard HR channels, ambushed Dominic Reed at a charity luncheon at Le Bernardin, and handed him the portfolio. By Monday, She was sitting in a corner office at the Reed Capital building on Wall Street, boasting the title of Junior Executive Strategist. Within 6 months, she was the talk of the firm. Dominic, a notoriously difficult man who fired Ivy League graduates for breathing too loudly, was captivated by her. Or rather, he was captivated by the work I was doing. Because, just like in the past life, Vanessa quickly realized she was in way over her head. The job required daily briefings, complex financial modeling, and ruthless market analysis. She couldn't even format a pivot table in Excel. So she hired me. "I need you, Harp," she had pleaded over a $400 lunch at the plaza, sliding a contract across the table. "I'll pay you triple what you're making at that awful boutique firm. You'll be my shadow, my secret weapon. Nobody has to know." I signed the contract. I became her personal ghost. I moved into a sleek apartment in Tribeca, paid for by the exorbitant salary she funneled me to keep my mouth shut. Every morning, I would draft her emails, write her reports, and feed her the exact talking points she needed to impress Dominic. And I watched. I watched from the sidelines as they grew closer. I watched as Dominic looked at her with that predatory mixture of lust and admiration. "She's brilliant," I overheard Dominic telling a board member one evening while I was arranging catering for a late-night merger meeting. "Vanessa has a mind like a steel trap. She sees angles the rest of the market is blind to." I stood by the mahogany doors, holding a tray of San Pellegrino, keeping my head bowed. "She doesn't even know what a derivative is, Dominic," I thought, suppressing a smirk. By the spring of 2021, 2 years into my second life, Vanessa was untouchable. She was promoted to Senior Vice President of Acquisitions. She wore Cartier on her wrists and custom Tom Ford suits. She and Dominic were officially a couple, plastered across the society pages of the New York Post. But the cracks were beginning to form, exactly as I had orchestrated. Because this time, I wasn't just giving Vanessa flawless work. I was giving her work that sounded brilliant, but was subtly disconnected from her actual persona. I would use historical war analogies in her speeches that she couldn't properly pronounce. I would weave intricate references to obscure economic theories into her briefs. Dominic was incredibly sharp. A man doesn't build a $40 billion empire by being oblivious. The first real fracture happened during the Aegis Tech acquisition, the very deal that had cemented their bond in my past life. We were in Conference Room A, a sprawling glass box overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Vanessa was standing at the head of the long oak table, presenting the quarterly integration strategy to Dominic and the board. I was sitting in the back corner, a nameless assistant furiously typing notes on a MacBook. "As you can see," Vanessa said, clicking her laser pointer at a graph I had generated at 3:00 a.m. "The synergy between the two logistics platforms will reduce overhead by 14%. It's a textbook application of the Pareto principle, aggressively modified for a digital supply chain." The board nodded in unison, but Dominic leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes narrowing. He steepled his fingers, staring at Vanessa. "A textbook application, Vanessa?" Dominic's voice was a low, resonant baritone that instantly commanded the room. "Interesting. Walk me through how you accounted for the depreciation of Aegis's physical server farms in that 14%. The Pareto principle usually assumes a static resource pool. Server farms degrade." The room went dead silent. I stopped typing. I looked up through my thick-rimmed glasses. Vanessa froze. The color drained from her perfectly bronzed face. She looked at the slide, then at Dom. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. In my past life, I had prepped her for this exact question during a cab ride. This time, I had conveniently forgotten to mention it. Well, the depreciation it's factored into the broader overhead, she stammered, a bead of sweat breaking through her expensive foundation. Is it? Dominic asked, opening the physical dossier in front of him. Because looking at page 12, the amortization schedule seems to run parallel to the synergy gains, not subtract from them. It's a bold choice. I want to know your reasoning. Vanessa was drowning. She looked frantically toward the back of the room, toward me. Her eyes were wide with sheer, unadulterated panic. "Help me!" she was silently screaming. I kept my face entirely blank. I tilted my head slightly, offering her absolutely nothing. I would need to review the raw data to give you the exact granular breakdown, Dominic, she finally managed, her voice trembling slightly. My team ran those numbers late last night. Dominic didn't look away from her for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. The admiration in his eyes flickered, replaced by a cold, calculating curiosity. Your team, Dominic repeated softly. He closed the folder. I thought you generated these models yourself, Vanessa. I oversee them, of course, she said quickly, trying to recover her confident posture. Dominic's gaze slowly drifted from Vanessa. It swept across the room, past the wealthy board members, past the executive VP until it landed squarely on me in the back corner. I didn't look away. I held the billionaire's stare. In my past life, I would have shrunk down, terrified of his attention. But the girl who was terrified of Dominic Reed died on a marble floor. I let a micro-expression slip, just a ghost of a knowing, cynical smile. Dominic's eyes widened a fraction of an inch. He saw it. Meeting adjourned, Dominic suddenly announced, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. Vanessa, I want the granular breakdown on my desk by 5 o'clock, and bring your assistant. The elevator ride to the top floor was agonizingly silent. Vanessa paced the confined space, biting her manicured thumbnail, a nervous habit she thought she had outgrown. I stood perfectly still, holding my leather portfolio, watching the floor numbers tick upward. When the doors finally chimed open, revealing Dominic's sprawling office, a fortress of mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, Vanessa pasted on a fragile, practiced smile. I remained the invisible shadow trailing behind her. Dominic was standing by the window, swirling a glass of Macallan. He didn't turn around when we entered. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until Vanessa cleared her throat. Dominic, I brought the granular data you requested. It was just a minor miscommunication with the quantitative team. I've sorted it out. She gestured for me to hand over the file. I stepped forward, placing the pristine white folder on his desk. He finally turned. His eyes ignored the folder and locked onto me. Up close, Dominic Reed. Reed was an intimidating force of nature, radiating wealth and ruthless ambition. Vanessa, he said softly, never breaking eye contact with me. Who is your assistant? This is Harper, Vanessa interjected quickly, stepping between us like a human shield. She just handles my scheduling and basic typing. She doesn't really understand the high-level mechanics of what we do here. Is that so? Dominic mused. He reached around Vanessa and tapped the white folder. Harper, explain the depreciation of the server farms, right now. Vanessa laughed, a high, panicked sound. "Dominic, please, she's just a secretary. She wouldn't know." "A static resource pool assumes infinite digital expansion," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through Vanessa's frantic energy like a scalpel. "But Aegis Tech uses legacy hardware in their Ohio data centers. The physical degradation outpaces the digital synergy by a factor of 2.4% annually. The amortization schedule on page 12 doesn't run parallel. It acts as a tax shield. It offsets the operational losses in the third quarter, creating a net positive cash flow that masks the depreciation." The room fell deathly quiet. Vanessa stared at me, her mouth hanging open in absolute shock. I wasn't supposed to speak. I was supposed to play dumb. But the script had changed. Dominic's lips slowly curled into a genuine, predatory smile. "A tax shield," he murmured. "Brilliant, aggressive, and legally ambiguous enough to slip past a standard audit." He finally looked at Vanessa, his gaze dripping with disdain. "Did you teach her that, Vanessa?" Yes, we discussed it at length," Vanessa lied, her voice cracking. "It was a collaborative effort." "Get out," Dominic said. "Excuse me?" Vanessa gasped. "I said get out of my office, Vanessa. Leave the assistant." For a moment, I thought Vanessa might actually faint. Her face turned an ashen grey, her eyes darting frantically between me and the billionaire she had manipulated. She opened her mouth to protest, but Dominic's icy glare silenced her. She turned and fled, her heels clicking rapidly against the hardwood floor. When the door clicked shut, Dominic poured a second glass of scotch and held it out to me. "You wrote the proposal," he stated. It wasn't a question. The demographic leverage, the acquisition strategies, all of it. It was you. "Vanessa is a brilliant presenter," I replied diplomatically, refusing to take the glass. "I merely synthesize the raw data." "Stop playing games, Harper," Dominic warned, stepping closer. "I've suspected it for months. The woman I speak to at dinner parties doesn't possess the intellect to structure a multi-billion-dollar corporate raid. She's a parrot. You are the architect." He was sharper than I remembered. In my past life, his arrogance had blinded him. This time, my subtle breadcrumbs had led him straight to the truth. But I couldn't let him feel victorious. I had to pull him into the trap. "If you knew," I countered, meeting his intense gaze. "Why did you let her keep the charade going? Why promote her? Why date her?" Dominic chuckled, a dark, hollow sound. "Because she is useful. She is the beautiful, distracting face of Reed Capital. She charms the board, she handles the press, and she keeps my bed warm. But you are the engine. I want you to work directly for me, Harper. Forget Vanessa. We have a $50 billion merger with Vanguard Tech on the horizon. I need your mind to make it bulletproof." I was offering me the kingdom. It was everything I had ever wanted in my first life. Recognition. Power. Dominic. But looking at him now, I only felt a cold, metallic disgust. I was just as hollow as Vanessa, perfectly willing to use people until they broke. "I'll build the Vanguard model," I said quietly. "But I stay in the shadows. Vanessa stays the face of the operation. If the board finds out you've been relying on a ghostwriter, your credibility takes a hit. We maintain the status quo." Dominic studied me, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Why do you want to hide, Harper?" "I don't like the spotlight," I lied smoothly. "I just like the math," he agreed. For the next 3 months, the dynamic shifted into something toxic and thrilling. By day, Vanessa pranced around the office, acting like the Queen of Wall Street, completely unaware that Dominic and I were secretly architecting the Vanguard merger behind closed doors. But Vanessa wasn't entirely stupid. She felt the shift. She noticed Dominic's dismissive tone, the way he stopped inviting her to private strategy meetings. Paranoia began to eat her alive. One evening, I found her tearing through my desk in the Tribeca apartment. "What are you looking for?" I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. She spun around, wild-eyed and desperate. "You're sleeping with him. Admit it. You're trying to steal my life, Harper." "I'm doing exactly what you pay me to do, Vanessa," I said coldly. "Keeping you from looking like an idiot." "You're fired," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Pack your things and get out. I don't need you anymore. The Vanguard deal is closing on Friday. I have the final models. I'm done with you." I nodded slowly. "Okay, Vanessa. Good luck with the audit." I packed my bags and walked out. I didn't need to stay. The trap was already set, and the timer was ticking down to 0. Friday arrived with the kind of torrential downpour that made New York City feel like a sinking ship. I sat in a dimly lit corner booth of a coffee shop directly across the street from the Reed Capitol building, nursing a black coffee. I had a clear view of the glass-walled boardroom on the 40th floor. Today was the day. The final signing of the Vanguard Tech merger, overseen by the Securities and Exchange Commission and an independent auditing firm, Kensington and Ross. Up in that boardroom, Vanessa was undoubtedly wearing her best power suit, smiling for the cameras, ready to take credit for the most lucrative merger of the decade. Dominic would be standing beside her, arrogant and victorious, believing he had outsmarted everyone by using my brain and her face. They didn't know about the Hayes variable. Months ago, when I first started building the Vanguard models, I wove a catastrophic algorithmic flaw deep into the foundational code of the risk assessment matrices. It was a phantom multiplier. On the surface, it projected a conservative 20% growth margin. But beneath the code, it tied Vanguard's debt liabilities directly to Reed Capital's equity. It was a financial suicide pact disguised as a synergy forecast. I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. The independent auditors from Kensington and Ross would be running the final stress test on the live data right about now. I pulled out my laptop and logged into a secure, encrypted server. I watched the live trading data for Reed Capital. At 10:22 a.m., a slight dip occurred, a fraction of a percent. At 10:25 a.m., the SEC's automated flagging system triggered. I knew this because I had anonymously tipped off the regulatory board 3 days prior, advising them to look specifically at the amortization code on line 409 of the merger proposal. At 10:30 a.m., all hell broke loose. I watched through the rain-streaked window as the atmosphere in the 40th floor boardroom shifted from celebratory to chaotic. Men in dark suits were standing up, pointing fingers. I could almost see the veins bulging in Dominic's neck as he yelled at a terrified-looking auditor. My phone buzzed. It was Dominic. I let it ring. It buzzed again. Vanessa. I let it ring. The stock ticker on my screen began to freefall. Word had leaked. The SEC had halted the merger. The financial models were completely fraudulent, artificially inflating Reed Capital's assets by over $3 billion to secure the Vanguard loans. I finally picked up my phone and dialed the boardroom's direct line. Dominic answered on the first ring. "Harper, what the hell did you do?" he roared, his voice echoing with sheer panic. "The auditors are claiming the entire foundational matrix is fabricated. The SEC is threatening federal fraud charges." "I didn't do anything, Dominic," I said softly, taking a sip of my coffee. "Vanessa built those models. She signed the disclosure agreements. She presented them to the board. It has her name on every single page." "Don't play games with me," he screamed. "I know you wrote it. I will destroy you, Harper. I'll tell them everything." "Tell them what?" I asked, smiling into the phone. "That the great Dominic Reed, the genius billionaire, knowingly allowed his unqualified girlfriend to present fraudulent documents to the SEC? That you signed off on a $50 billion merger, knowing the lead strategist was a fraud? That makes you a co-conspirator, Dominic. It makes you complicit in massive corporate fraud." The silence on the line was deafening. He realized I had him in a checkmate. "Why?" he finally whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. "Why would you do this?" "Because nobody likes the quiet, smart girl." I echoed the exact words Vanessa had spoken to me before I died. "They like the shiny girl. But glass shatters, Dominic, and you shouldn't have built your empire on it." I hung up. Within an hour, unmarked black SUVs pulled up to the Reed Capitol building. Men in FBI windows stormed the lobby. I watched as they escorted Vanessa out first in handcuffs, her mascara running down her face, screaming hysterically at the cameras. Dominic followed shortly after, looking pale, defeated, and completely broken. His empire was gone. His reputation was ashes. He was facing decades in federal prison. I closed my laptop and stepped out into the rain. The air felt incredibly fresh, washing away the lingering phantom taste of blood and poison that had haunted me for 2 years. I had given them exactly what they wanted. I let them climb to the very top of the world. And then I cut the rope. The ultimate revenge isn't about immediate destruction. It's about letting the villains build their own magnificent cages before locking the door. Harper proved that true power doesn't need a spotlight. It only requires a brilliant mind and flawless timing. If you loved this intense tale of corporate betrayal, rebirth, and cold-blooded vengeance, make sure to hit that like button. Share this story with your friends who love a good plot twist, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling audio dramas.